Hi students, welcome back to Study Smart channel. Today we are going to look into Science Form 1 subtopic 4.7 Plant Reproduction. At the end of this video, if you learn anything new, please do like this video and subscribe to Study Smart channel. Thank you. Today we are going to study about the structure and function of each parts of flower, pollination process in plants, cross and self-pollination, and the fertilization process in plants. Just like any other living organisms, plants also need to reproduce in order to ensure the survival of their species. Let's look into the structure and function of each parts of a flower that involve in reproduction process of a plant. Did you know that plants can undergo sexual reproduction just like human beings? Similar to humans and animals, sexual reproduction in plants involves the fusion of male and female gametes. Let's learn the function of each parts of a flower that enable the reproduction of a plant. First, we have the anther and the filament. The anther and filament are parts of a flower stamen. The stamen is the male part of the flower. The anther makes and holds the pollen, which is like the flower's powdery seeds. The filament holds up the anther so that insects and the wind can pick up the pollen. Next, we have the petals. Petals are colorful parts of a flower. They attract insects like bees and butterflies, which will help the flower to pollinate. Sepals are green parts that look like small leaves. They protect the flower bud before it opens. Now let's look at the female parts of a flower. The stigma, style, and the ovary are parts of a flower's pistil. The pistil is the female part of the flower. The stigma is the sticky top part that catches the pollen. The style is a tube that connects the stigma to the ovary, while the ovary is at the bottom of the pistil and hold the ovules. The ovary will become the fruit. Ovules are inside the ovary. When pollen reaches the ovules, they become seeds that can grow into new plants. In conclusion, the stamen is the male part of the flower and includes the anther and filament. The pistil is the female part and includes the stigma, style, and ovary. Now, let's study about the pollination process in plants. Pollination process is defined as the process where the pollen from a flower's anther lands on the stigma of the same or another flower. This will help the flower to make seeds. There are two types of flowers. Flowers can be unisexual or bisexual. Unisexual flowers have either male or female reproductive parts. Male flowers have stamens which consist of anther and filament, while female flowers have pistil which consists of stigma, style, and ovary. For unisexual flowers, pollen must travel from a male flower to a female flower. This can happen through pollinating agents. Pollinating agents are the mediums such as wind and water, or organisms like insects, bees, or birds that transfer pollen from the male structure of flower to the female structure of flower in order to facilitate fertilization. A bisexual flower, also known as the perfect flower, contains both the male and female reproductive organs. This means that a single flower has the ability to produce both pollen and ovules, allowing it to potentially self-pollinate or cross-pollinate with other flowers. In summary, pollination process is facilitated by mediums or organisms by transferring the pollen from the anther to the stigma of a flower. The transfer of pollen within the same flower or between flowers on the same plant is known as self-pollination. The transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma within flowers of two different plants is known as cross-pollination. Fertilization process in plants. The first step for fertilization to happen in plants is obviously pollination. Pollen grains will fall onto the stigma. Pollen grains, which contain the male gametes, or also known as the sperm cell, will be transferred from the anther to the stigma of the plant. Second process is the formation of pollen tube. Once a pollen grain lands on a compatible stigma, it will start to germinate and start growing a pollen tube. The pollen tube extends down through the style directed by the chemical signals towards the ovary where the ovules are located. The third process is the penetration of pollen tube into the ovule. The pollen tube reaches the ovary and penetrates the ovule through a small opening called the micropyle. The growth of the pollen tube until it reaches the egg cell inside the ovule creates a pathway for the sperm cells in order to fuse with the egg cells later on. The last process is the fertilization. The sperm cell travels through the pollen tube, enters the ovule where it will fuses with the egg cell. The fusion of the male and female gamete form a zygote which will develop into an embryo and eventually grow into a new plant. This process is called as the fertilization. Well students, we have successfully completed today's study session. The topics covered in this video are structure and function of each parts of flower, pollination process in plants, cross and self-pollination, and fertilization process in plants. Alright students, that's all for today. Until we meet again in the next video, thank you and have a nice day. Bye!